Today, I'm going to show you how to create a risograph print in Photoshop. Hey there and welcome to Phlearn. My name is Aaron Nace. You can find me on phlearn.com where we make learning fun. And in today's video, we're going to show you how to create a really cool risograph print in Photoshop. Now, I really like this process because we're taking basically geometrical shapes in Photoshop, but we're going to be applying some filters to them that make them look a lot more realistic and a lot more handmade. Then we're going to take these shapes and fill them with color and use blending modes to have them actually interact with each other to make it look like different colors of print is actually printed on paper. And to finish everything off, we're going to add a paper texture that's going to make everything look completely hand done. We got a great tutorial for you. Let's jump into Photoshop. So the first thing we're going to do in Photoshop, we're going to hit Control-Command-N for new, and we're just going to create a 2000 by 2000 pixel image. So let's go ahead and hit OK, and we're going to hit F for full screen. Now, keep in mind, you're going to be able to download this PSD as well as the textures from this tutorial. Just follow the link in the description right down below. That way you can kind of get in here and see everything that we've done. So my first step, we're going to start creating our shapes. And for the shapes, we're going to start off with our polygonal lasso tool. Now, I'm just going to create a couple fun shapes here. There's no right or wrong. What we're going to do is kind of like lay our foundation. So let's go ahead and create a new layer here. And we're just going to start by making a couple like geometric shapes, but I don't necessarily want them to be perfect. All right, if you create a couple points and then go right back to where you started, you'll see that little O right next to your cursor. You can just click when you see that O and it'll just finish up, go right back to that original place. So that looks pretty good. We're gonna hit Shift Delete, which is the keyboard shortcut for the fill dialog, and we're just gonna fill that with black. Control-Command-D to deselect. So there's our first shape. Now on a new layer, we're gonna go ahead and create our next shape. This is just gonna be a triangle. So let's go ahead and pop our triangle. And again, I don't necessarily want this to be like quote unquote perfect. All right, so Shift Command to fill with black. All right, there we go. Our next shape, we're gonna go ahead and hit M for our marquee tool. And we're just gonna make a little bit of a stretched out sphere. This is on a new layer. I'm gonna hit Shift Delete and we're gonna fill that with black as well. Now for our next shape, I'm actually kind of excited about this. We are going to go ahead and create, back with our polygonal lasso tool, we're going to create a triangle here. Boop. There we go. That looks pretty good. And now I'm going to duplicate this over and over again. So on my new layer, I'm going to hit Shift Delete, and that's going to fill with black. There we go. Now with my selection still active, this is the real key, we're going to hit Option-Command-T. And if you are on a PC, it's going to be Alt-Control-T. And then I'm just gonna move this to the right while holding Shift. There we go, and hit Enter. So Option-Command-T is known as our step, and then we wanna do a repeat of what we just did. So I can actually just like do a bunch more of those, and that's the repeat. So step is gonna be Option-Command-T, and then to repeat that step, hit Shift Option-Command-T. Okay, so Shift Option-Command-T, and there we go. Each time I hit T, there, boom, look at that. Isn't that really nice? Now, on the bottom, it's just like a little bit uneven, so not a big deal because it's all in the same layer. I'm gonna hit M for the marquee tool. By the way, if you're using a marquee and it selects the elliptical marquee and you wanna switch that to a rectangular marquee, just hit Shift M, and you're gonna see if I hit Shift M, it's gonna switch right through. You can see right up here. All right, there we go, Shift M. It's just gonna switch through my different marquees. All right, so now I'm gonna get a rectangular marquee. We're just gonna select that bottom and hit delete. There we go. Now we have a nice clean edge on the bottom. And look at that fun face. Ooh, this is kind of looking like a face. Kind of unintentional, but I'll take it. Really, really fun. Okay, I wanna do one more shape. Let's just create a new layer. And this time we're gonna use the pen tool. So let's go P for the pen tool. All right, we're just gonna click and drag out in this direction. You can really use whatever shapes you want here. I just kind of wanna create like a little bit of a oblong, kind of like an O. There we go, and finish this up. Now, if you get something like this and you're like, oh, I'm not too happy with that, no big deal. Hold Control or Command, and you can actually move these control points at any time, okay? So that's what we're kind of doing here. I'm just gonna move these points here to get it a little bit more like uniform, basically. Want everything to look just a little bit. There we go, that's looking pretty good. But my goal with this image is to make it look like these shapes were cut out by hand. So I'm actually trying to not make it perfect. If I was trying to make like a perfect rounded rectangle, what I would use would be like the rounded rectangle tool, where you could do something like that and then, you know, increase the radius, something like that. That's cool, but my goal is actually to make something a lot less regular. That looks really good. So let's go ahead and turn this into a shape. I'm gonna hit P for the pen tool because I have a selection active. We're gonna right click and I'm gonna go to make selection. Okay, we're gonna feather that by 0 pixels. And then on my new layer, let's hit Shift Delete and we'll fill that with black. Perfect. Now I'm gonna inset this a little bit. So we're gonna go to our selection tool, just the marquee tool is good. Let's right click in here and go down to transform selection. And then this case, it just transforms the selection, nothing on the layer itself, just the selection gets transformed. All right, let's go ahead and just bring that out there a little bit, hit enter. So you can see we have an inset. And now that we have inset, I just hit the delete key and it deletes it away. So there we go, our cool shapes. I think this is so much fun. We're gonna be using these shapes in a variety of different ways, but the first thing I wanna do with these shapes is I want them to be, again, a little bit more irregular. Like I want them to really look like they were done by hand. And I wanna make sure the edges aren't super sharp. So if you zoom in, you know, you're gonna see like incredibly sharp edges on these different points here, even here. And we can just smooth all that stuff out. It's gonna be a lot easier if we just smooth it out. So here's what we're gonna do. First thing is basically I need to make a selection of all of these different shapes. And there's more than one way to do that. A really nice trick here is just to hold Control or Command and click right on the thumbnail of one of your shapes. So I'm gonna hold Control or Command and click on the thumbnail of our first shape. And you can see here, it turned it into a selection. Okay, now if I hold Control or Command plus Shift, look here on my cursor, and you're gonna see I'm gonna be able to select multiple layers at the same time. So we're gonna do that with all of these layers. Each one of them is gonna get selected. Okay, so now that all of those layers are selected, let's just go ahead and create a new layer. We're gonna go to select and then down here to select and mask. And basically with our select mask dialog, let's just go to black and white. That looks good. We're just gonna smooth and bring up our feathering just a little bit. So smother is not a word. Feathering, smooth, and then we wanna bring our contrast back. There we go. Cool, let's go ahead and bring our contrast up. And you can see how it just basically gives everything a little bit of an edge there. So smoothing and feathering built in, and then contrast kind of like makes it a sharp edge again. So let's go to show original. So you can see all these like kind of hard points or sharp points. And then the after, everything is smoothed out. And that's what I want for now. So let's hit okay. And I'm just gonna output this to a selection. Let's hit okay. And then, you know what, on a new layer, I can just hit Shift Delete and I'm gonna just fill this all with black. So let's hit okay there. And then we're gonna group together our shapes, Control or Command G, and we're just gonna call this shapes, and I'm gonna make that invisible. Okay, so now on one layer, I've got all of my different shapes and they each have their nice rounded edges. And this is looking really good. So the next thing I want to do is they're pretty solid, and if you were using scissors or if this was on a piece of paper, you'd have all this little micro texture everywhere. So we're going to go ahead and load this into one of our filters in Photoshop, and we're going to add that texture. If we want to load this into a filter, right now, if I just make everything else invisible, we have these shapes. They're just on a transparent background, which is okay for a lot of things, but if you want to run an actual filter, you need to have them on a white background, okay? It needs to be black and white on the same layer, basically. So what are we gonna do? We're gonna just grab an adjustment layer. So right down here, you're gonna see your adjustment layers. We're gonna go to solid color, and I'm gonna go all the way up here to white, and then put that under my layer. Okay, so we have a completely white solid color fill layer, and then we have our shapes, and now I'm gonna merge these together again. So shift click both layers and hit Control or Command E to merge them together again. Okay, now I realize we're kind of jumping around, but the reason is we wanted to create our shapes on individual layers just so we'd have a lot of control over each of those layers, and I can come back to them at any time. Then we had to turn them into a selection because I wanted to refine the edge of the selection. So instead of triangles being super pointy, they had a rounded edge. That's why we made it into a selection. And then we filled that with a new layer right here, and then merge that together with white so we can do a filter. So I know it's kind of like a lot of little steps, but That's why we're doing it, is so ultimately this looks like it was done by hand. So here we go, our layer 6. Next we're gonna go to filter, and we're gonna go down to our filter gallery. And this is where a lot of the really fun stuff is gonna come in. Let's just delete everything and kind of show you around how this works. So you have a lot of different tools at your disposal. If you wanted to make it look like rough pastels, you can see how my edge there, let's just zoom in a little bit more. My edge starts to look a lot more like, hey, maybe this was done on a piece of paper or something like that. So we could bring our stroke length a little bit smaller, maybe our stroke detail, there we go. We could bring our scaling up and down and things like that. Now, the fun thing about this is you can actually add these effects onto each other. So I'm gonna hit this little plus icon here, and I could add another rough pastels, okay? But in this kind of time, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna add a diffuse glow. So we'll just go ahead and we're gonna find our diffuse glow. There we go. Let's just go ahead and see all of these different effects. And there really is no right or wrong when you're doing this, by the way, okay? So it's really just like, hey, find the one that you think works well. So this diffuse glow, I think, is really nice because it adds a little bit of grain. That's right here, you can control that. And it makes the edges a little bit lighter than the center of it. So I think that's really nice. Now let's go ahead and add another one. We're gonna do a spatter. So let's just hit this plus button there and then go to our spatter, okay? There we are. And then we're gonna do one more, and that's gonna be our torn edges. So we'll just click here, and then there's my torn edges. Okay, so let's go ahead and zoom in, and you can see my edges are looking really nice and rough now, fantastic. But I'm not happy with how it looks just yet because I want my diffuse glow to be on the top. So I'm gonna just take this and just drag it right up on top, and you see I've got a very different effect. So my rough pastels here, that's contributing to the effect. The spatter is contributing to the effect. You can see it's just giving me a lot more of an uneven edge there. My torn edges is going on like a little bit of a smaller scale, and then the diffuse glow at the top is just kind of finishing it all off. And that looks really good. So you can see it kind of looks like these were cut out by hand, and it looks like they're kind of bleeding into the paper a little bit because, you know, when you make a print, you don't always have like perfectly sharp edges. Sometimes it seeps in, especially depending on the technology that you're using. And in this case, this is exactly what we want. So let's hit OK, and boom, it gets applied to this layer. So we have our shapes. The hard part is done. It's time for the fun part, and that's to convert these shapes in a way where we can actually use them as colors that are gonna overlap. So in order to do that, first we need to turn this back into a selection again. So if there's ever been a good test of using selections in Photoshop, this tutorial is gonna get you there. So how do we make our shapes into a selection? Well, there are a lot of ways to do it. My preferred way is through channels. So we're gonna go here to our channels dialog, okay? And then I'm gonna hold Control or Command and click right here on RGB. That's gonna select the lighter areas in your image, okay? It's very, very accurate also, I might add. So it selects the lighter areas. And now we're gonna go back to our layers, and I'm just gonna simply click on my adjustment layer. We're gonna go to solid color. And because I already have a selection active, let's just go up here to red. It automatically loads that selection into my layers. Fantastic. Now let's make this invisible, and you can see we actually have the opposite of what we want. So if you ever have the opposite of what you want on a layer mask, just click on your layer mask and hit Control or Command I, and there we go. So you can see we have all of the texture and detail from our filters loaded into this solid color fill layer. Let's go ahead and create a background. So we're gonna grab another solid color fill layer. This time we don't have any selections active, so nothing's gonna be, there we go, nothing's gonna be visible. And here we go. We're just gonna be duplicating this over and over again and using it in different ways. So let's go ahead and double click here. We're just gonna change the color to like a nice bright pink. Let's go a little bit lighter with this. Fantastic, that looks really good. And I'm gonna hit Control or Command J on this, and we're just gonna move this a little bit. There we go. And we're gonna change the color here to a blue color. So let's just double click on our color, and we're gonna change it to a blue. And then we're gonna change our layer blend mode from normal. We're gonna go to multiply. And here's where we can start to see all of these shapes like really doing a cool job overlapping with each other. Okay, so that's actually looking really, really nice. And now I can kind of decide what I do and don't want to be visible from this group. So we're gonna make a couple of these different groups. Okay, so in this case, I think this shape is really nice with these colors and this one at the top. So let's go ahead and group those together. Control Command G. And now what I'm gonna do, I know there's a lot of steps here, but this is gonna be super cool. Now what we're gonna do is grab our marquee tool. We're just gonna make a selection out of this. I'm gonna hold Shift and then make a selection out of that one. And then on our layer mask, I'm just gonna click on my layer mask. Boop. And then only those two are gonna be visible right there. So here's what we can do, which is super fun. I'm gonna hit Control Command J to duplicate that entire group. We're gonna fill the layer mask with white, and then look at this, I can just move this anywhere I want. I can hit Control Command T and I can scale this also. So let's go ahead and put that about there. Okay, and now we're gonna simply change these colors. So instead of the pink and the blue, all right, we're gonna make a yellow and a blue. So let's go ahead and double click here, and we're gonna go to yellow. And you can see that automatically it adjusts. So the yellow and the blue, because we're using a multiply blend mode, it's gonna just kind of bring those together, and I'm gonna offset them a little bit more. Okay, now for this one, I want this bottom shape to be visible and the circle. So here on my layer mask, what we're gonna do is just select them. So we'll just go to our polygonal lasso tool. There we go, boop. Just go ahead and select the shapes that I want. Bring that up there. I'm gonna hold Shift. There we go. And once you have your selection, now we're just gonna inverse it. So we're gonna go to Select and then down to Inverse. And then I'm gonna fill this with black on the layer mask with the group. So Shift Delete, we're gonna fill that with black on the layer mask with the group, and then only those shapes show up. So you can see we started off with just a couple of shapes and we're using them in different ways. All right, well, let's go ahead and do this again. I'm gonna hit Control Command J on our first layer, and we're gonna see about a new, there we go, a new block of shapes here. So I'm just kind of like playing around, you know, finding patterns that I think are gonna work well. I like this triangle right there. I think that works pretty well. So again, all I have to do is select that triangle. So let's go ahead and just select the triangle. By the way, you can scale these, you can rotate them, you can do all kinds of stuff. So select the triangle, inverse, and then duplicate it. All right, there we go. And then let's just do another one of these. I realize that we kind of like have this black border around the edge, which is making it, or this, you know, colored border around the edge. Makes it a little bit tough to see, but there we go. As long as you can focus on your shapes, you're good to go. All right, there we go. So we have that shape there, and you can move these stuff around anytime you want to. All right, this is looking really good. Let's go ahead and grab a little bit more of this. We're just gonna fill the layer mask completely with white here, and there we go. I just want this shape. There we go. That's a good place for that shape right there. So we're gonna use our lasso tool. There we go. We're basically designing like a custom pattern here, which I think is super fun. Let's hit Control Command J. I'm gonna hit Control Command T and scale that way down now. There we go. Let's just bring the opacity down so I can see what I'm doing here, because I just wanna make sure that, cool, that looks good. I wanna use this in different places and at different scales. Perfect. This is looking good. All right, we're almost done here. Let's go ahead and bring it in a little bit more. And I don't really want like a repeating, I don't want it to be super obvious, you know, like the shapes, we're changing colors, we're changing scale, we're changing dimension, and there we go. That's gonna be super cool right there. Cool, so L for my lasso tool. All right, I know this seems like a bunch of different steps, but kind of like once you get used to like the basic idea, you'd be good to go. And you don't have to do it exactly like this, obviously. Oh, that's looking super cool. There we go, let's just bring that down. Marquee tool, I'm just gonna select here and select here. Shift Delete, we'll just fill that with black. All right, almost done. I think I just want like another little shape in there. So let's hit Control Command J on this again, fill this with white. Bring my opacity down a little bit, and then, yeah, cool. We'll just put that guy right there. That'll look really nice. Okay, L for our lasso tool. So we can see we have the offset built in. Fantastic. I think this is looking really, really cool. And now each one of these shapes is in basically its own group. So if I wanted to just move each one of these individual shapes around, like I can just grab my move tool and move them around if I want to. I think this is looking really nice. So let's go ahead and zoom in and look at all that really nice texture that we have. It looks irregular, and in my opinion, it's doing a good job looking like it's handmade. Now, we're not done yet because I really want this to look like a print. So what we're gonna actually do is bring a paper texture in over top of this, and it's just gonna really bring it all together. So you can actually download these paper textures from Phlearn.com. Just click on the link right down below to get to them. So I'm just gonna click and drag them right in over top of everything. Fantastic. And these are gonna go right at the very top. So let's go group them together. We'll just call these textures. There we go. Let's group all this together. We're gonna call this shapes. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and archive these because we don't need them anymore. So we're just gonna group all those and call them archive. We'll make that invisible and group that together. Now you guys can download this PSD for free. So you can get in here and really see everything that was done. All right, so let's start with our textures here. Now, this texture is super cool. It looks like paper with a lot of these little dots in here. So we're gonna change this layer blend mode from normal to screen because I only want the lighter areas to show up. But it's a little bit like too much visibility right now. I want only the bright spots to show up. I don't want the rest of the texture. So we're just gonna use a levels adjustment because it's set to a screen blend mode. And with screen blend mode, the darks become invisible and the lights are visible. So if I just make the darks darker, they're gonna become invisible. Let's hit Control-Command L here, and we're just gonna take our darks and just make them darker. Okay, we can even do this with our midtones. There we go, look at that. Beautiful. So we just have a general kind of like little paper fleck texture over top of everything, and it's too visible, so we're just gonna lower the opacity here a bit. There we go, and that's looking pretty good. Now this other texture, let's hit Control-Command-T and transform. We're just gonna scale this up a little bit. We're gonna go through our different blend modes. We're gonna just try overlay and soft light. There we go. You can see each one of your blend modes is gonna have a kind of a different effect. I think soft light actually works really well. It's just giving everything a little bit like more of a texture. You can see it, like it actually looks like a textured wall or piece of paper a lot more than it did before. All right, and then if we want to get in here and just adjust the levels, you can have this other texture be more or less visible here as well. There we go. So if I wanted, less of it to be visible or more of this to be visible, you can do this at any point in time, which is super, super cool because we're working completely non-destructively. There we go. I think that looks really good. So we can see both of these textures kind of stack up and really give it, in my opinion, a cool printed effect. So all of these things that we did together, the whole purpose was to make this look like it was done by hand. And now that that's done, check this out. I can go back in each one of these shapes. So like, check this out. This shape, remember, this is actually two different shapes, right? So if I wanted to use my move tool and move this around, I could actually do that. Let's just hit shift and click on the layer mask. I could actually move this shape around like right there. Okay, and then basically on my layer mask, I just need to like make it visible over here. So I can just paint with my brush tool right there. Check this out, and kind of move it around right in there. So I've got a lot of variation and a lot of control that I can use. Just keep in mind that they're in a group that has a mask. That's why I was kind of hiding some of those areas before. But still, every single one of these elements, if I just take the entire thing and move it around, you can see it's going to overlap with my other shapes there too. And let's just say I wanted it to be right there, for instance. Well, I would just take my marquee tool, okay, and make a selection on the outside, hit Shift Delete, and then fill that with black on my layer mask, and then it becomes invisible right there as well. Okay, so all of these really cool things you can do with this technique. All right, let's go ahead and just move you back to where you were before. There we go, somewhere right about there. Looks pretty good. And we'll just fill the rest with black. Alrighty, well, that's all there is to our risograph effect. I know it's quite a bit, but I think we've wound up with a really cool thing. And the greatest thing about this technique is you can scale this really large too. So if you want to get this printed on a fabric or something like that, it'd be a perfect time to do it. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. Give us a big thumbs up. And if you want to get a free tutorial every single week, click on that subscribe button. Now, if it's time for you to get super amazing at Photoshop, photography, and Lightroom, check out Phlearn Pro. We've got an exclusive discount for you in the link right down below. Thanks again. I'll Phlearn you later. Bye, everyone.